Recording in progress.
All right, friends, I have that it's time. It's so good to see you this evening. I'm glad that you're here, and we really hope this time together is a blessing. I do have one announcement I want to make. You may or may not be aware that Vicki Harris helps me with this a great deal. You may have seen the announcement going out. She is coming up on her retirement. She was walking around today letting people know she has 9 days left. I was crying and she was jumping for joy doing the little Charlie Chaplin heel click. So we're happy for her and excited. It's hard to see her leave after so many faithful years of service to this church, but at the same time, we're thrilled for that next phase of life and time with her grandkids that she desires. Additionally, I want you to know though that this week is her last week helping us. She'll be moving on. And will be her last official day is the coming up around as the last one in February, so the 28th. Wanted you to know that also too, we'll have a celebration for her on the 26th, that Sunday. We'll be in Friendship Court between services, and she'll be there the whole time before and after, where you can show your appreciation to Vicki for her service to the church and the blessing that she's been to each one of us. We thought that would be, she didn't really want a bigger event. We tried to talk her into that, but she wanted something smaller, but we thought that would be really good because many of the Bible studies and Sunday school classes she supports have been taking place kind of on Sunday morning, and the people who know her and want to celebrate will be there at that time. So it'll be a nice opportunity to say thank you. So we're deeply appreciative of her. Additionally, I want to remind you that we have no Bible study next week, not because you get the week off or anything. It is Ash Wednesday, and we are expecting you to be at one of the Ash Wednesday experiences that we have going all day that day. So we hope you'll join us for that. And to answer the question, yes, we are doing the drive-through again, or what we call Ashes to Go. You will be able to participate in that. We had a few hundred people last year participate in that, so we decided to do that again, even though now we can have more formal services. We'll have the other services as well. So you'll see more about this. We have opportunities literally all day long. Additionally, I want to let you know of something that the word is kind of getting out on. It just got kind of finalized this past week, but we're very excited about. On Wednesdays at noon during the lunch hour, we're going to have something called the Parable Project. And so here in this room, everybody's encouraged either to bring their lunch with them, or we have an amazing kitchen that makes lunch for a very inexpensive price. And you can buy your lunch and come over here. Just leave enough time that you can get your lunch and get over here by noon and be able to hear a speaker, another United Methodist pastor from another church. There are several great ones: Eleanor Colvin, Keith Somerville, a former intern that was here, Schuler Sitch, will be here, as well as Meredith Wendy Mills, and then also Stacy Auld, who is a head chaplain for the Methodist hospital system. So you're going to have some amazing, amazing speakers here for that. It'll be a great time. And they'll be talking about the parable that we'll be looking at that following Sunday. So it'll be exciting to hear these different viewpoints on that. It'll be really good. And then additionally, I wanted to call your attention to another event on the 26th, the gathering. I think I shared with you last week and via the email. We're going to have a slightly different format. It's going to be a lot of fun. The biggest difference is that the gathering will be held at 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. We're trying to solve the issue that we have seen, or it's been reported to us, that parents of young children feel like that it's a lot on a weeknight to be there, and their kids' school schedules and everything. And then also we have others who don't really like to drive after dark. And so this hopefully meets both those needs. We'll meet together at 4. There will be a presentation. If you're unable to go, that presentation will be available online. And we'll be focusing in on the mission of the church to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world, and how we do that through our outreach and mission ministries. And then following that, we're going to give about 10 minutes. You know, if you've ever seen how much I sweat at one of those under the camera lights and all that, we'll take about 10 minutes and get an opportunity then to do table talks, and you'll have an ability to sit with members of the executive staff and the leadership team of the church and ask any question you want. There are going to be table conversations with cake and coffee, so please don't be rude. Okay, and if you're, it's not a time for grandstanding. It's a time for real conversation to talk about the different issues that are going on in the church and to make sure that everyone is being heard. So we hope everyone's going to be heard at that. But also too, if you do bring something, you got something you want to share with us, we're happy to hear it. We'll talk to you about it. But please understand, we are going to talk with you, right? This isn't so people can talk at each other. Our culture has enough of that around us. Amen. So we want to model something more positive in a small group interaction. But I think it'll be great. And plus, did I mention we have a kitchen that knows how to cook? Cake and coffee is going to be kind of nice. So it'll be good. Be a blessing. Well, friends, I'm about ready to jump in. Were there any questions about those items? All right, wonderful. Normally I bring you a prayer. It's usually pre-written, something by somebody else, and either a theologian or something out of a hymnal. But tonight you're going to get a Brad Morgan original. I decided to do that because I thought I would go to that. So friends, let us pray. God of grace, God of mercy, and God of love, pour your Holy Spirit out upon us. Give us your knowledge and understanding as we search your word, looking for meaning, for hope, and for something that can make a difference in our lives. Lord, as we look to all these stories of healing, we see the miraculous just jump off the page. Suspend any disbelief or doubt. Help us to accept you as you are and as Matthew presents you. Help us to behold the amazing power available through Jesus Christ our Lord. And then, Lord, open our hearts and open our minds to be in a world that seems unfinished, where the work here seems undone. Lord, where the healings you did seem but a distant memory. And help us be the people who follow you, who trust you, who refuse to allow our doubt to stand in the way of our faith, and pursue you with all that we are in the hope that your healing mercy is still available to the world through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. We pray that our hearts, our souls, our minds, our bodies would be healed by a love that's so much greater than anything we can comprehend. We ask you to meet us this day and help us live into your love. Amen. All right, friends, let's take a look at slide 2. Does anybody remember the executive summary? It was a little transition place where I kind of talked about the executive summary. And then, in case you had forgotten it, in Bible study, I preached a whole sermon on it. Matthew talks in this little place about a little sentence, and it seems like a not much sentence because for us, it appears at the end of a chapter. And there at the end of the chapter, he lets us know about Jesus's ministry in this just brief summary. Jesus goes throughout all of Galilee, right? And he teaches, proclaims, and heals. Right? Do you remember that? I said it over and over and over and over in a sermon. And then I said, oh, I almost forgot. The big thing is he also went. Jesus went out to where these things were needed and were happening. And so what we've seen so far in the gospel to this point is this kind of moment in which Jesus has been doing teaching and proclamation, known as the Sermon on the Mount. And I gave you a full 2.5 weeks in it. And I almost thought about doing 3 and 4 more. But the reason is this: we love the Sermon on the Mount because it tells us we're not doing it right. And we love it when the Bible and Jesus makes it about us, because there's always one more thing we can do or need to do. And then, friends, I don't know about you, but I know I'm not doing it right. I know I need to be criticized. So I love it when somebody comes and tells me a truth where they jump on my toes, and it kind of causes it to be about me. But today is something different. And I would argue something as important but less understood. We are going to have a full-on display of the glory and power of God being revealed. But here's a secret that's not so secret. It's not about us at all. And it's not about what you do or don't do. It's about God and what God's doing to reveal God's self to the world and to demonstrate God's power authoritatively. And so as we do it, I know us. I know what we're going to do. We're going to rush and try to look for why were they healed, and do we have enough faith? And we're going to do all these kind of peculiar equations that are part of the religious landscape of the time we live in. But it's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that Jesus is choosing to heal, and in each healing, it is being revealed that there is a massive power at work in the world that nobody seems to understand. Do you remember? I know you remember the executive summary because I gave you a slide. All right, keep it with you. You'll need it later. But do you remember? I also told you pay a lot of attention to the very first verse of Matthew. What did it say? Do you remember? Chapter 1, verse 1 of Matthew. I know we did all that Sermon on the Mount. Brad, I thought you were going to ask us the 10 Commandments. I'm ready tonight. No. But we go back to that. What does Matthew say? He says about Jesus is who? What? Yeah, but before the genealogy, he gives Jesus a title. Messiah, right? I just want you to know he hasn't stopped trying to make that point. Everything you see here should scream to you, Jesus is the Messiah. Okay? Can I trust y'all? Are you going to restrain trying to read yourself into the story? Are you going to understand that these healings aren't about you, but they're about God on full display? Or are you going to try to figure them out and diagnose the patient and try to figure out how Jesus did it? Can you just put that on pause for a little bit and ask me about that after? Right now, I need you to just pause that part of your brain that's going to try to figure it out. You're going to mess it up. Let's instead just trust what the Bible says for just a little bit. And then you can tell me how I'm wrong about it, okay? Y'all with me? All right, let's go. All right, so the first healing here, we'll go to slide 3. The first healing is the healing of a leper. And here it's interesting, right? We had the Sermon on the Mount. They can't even get off the mountain. They're literally on the way down. Jesus just starts to go, and a leper appears to Jesus, kneels before Jesus, says, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. All right, friends, there is nothing on the Sermon on the Mount that says that. Nothing of what Jesus just did or said says that that's what he can do. The only thing that might suggest it is Jesus is the Messiah because of what he said on the Sermon on the Mount. And then here Jesus replies, I do choose, be made clean, and reaches out and touches him. Do you realize how scandalous this is? What is a leper supposed to do? A leper is supposed to keep their distance from the community. And should anybody from the community who is clean and not themselves defile approach, they are to shout out, unclean, unclean, so that people know not to come near them, right? In this case, the leper goes and approaches a crowd and goes right at Jesus. And friends, Jesus touches him. That should not happen. There's no place in Leviticus 13 or 14 where it says it's okay for a priest or holy person to touch that which is unclean, especially a leper. Those chapters are about all the regulations there. You can kind of see them. And Jesus, though, orders him to go show himself and do what's appropriate for his culture upon being cleansed. But it's just truly mind-boggling what has just gone down. Now remember, Jesus is still coming down the hill, gets to Capernaum, right? That's where their base is. That's where home is. And so he's trying to get, I don't know, a little rest. I mean, has Jesus gotten a break yet? He just does the Sermon on the Mount. He's not even done preaching, and somebody grabs him and says, heal me. It was a leper. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And now a centurion comes to Capernaum. I mean, like, are you kidding me? It's unholy what's going on here. What do we know a centurion is? Unclean. They're Gentile. And, friends, they're the enemy. Hold on, didn't he just say in the Sermon on the Mount, we're to hate our enemies and kick them out of town and kill them and get rid of? What? Love your enemies. Oh, wow. So he tells them, okay, I mean, this guy's got it so good, he's got servants, right? And so he tells them about the servant that needs to be healed. Jesus says, though, listen to this. Jesus says, I will go, I will come and cure him. I mean, do you know how hard that is for someone who is righteous and clean to navigate the camp, to get to the point that he could go into the home and not defile himself every step of the way so that he could even do the healing? But what does Jesus say? I'll go. I'll go. Jesus at each turn has a willingness and a desire to go and to make the difference and to do what's before him. So now this centurion, this Gentile centurion says, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word and my servant will be healed. For I also am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and the slave does it. Jesus was amazed. Now, friends, we've heard of a lot of things where people are amazed. We've heard already scribes are amazed, Pharisees are amazed, crowds are amazed. But I just want to tell you, if Jesus is amazed, pay attention. He is amazed. Truly, I tell you, in no one in Israel have I found such faith. And then he says, go, let it be done for you according to your faith. And the centurion goes away. It's an amazing kind of thing. And here we have this beautiful passage. Let's go to the third and fourth healings on slide 4. Here we have, then he returns to home, and I'll show you a picture of it. I like the pictures. And he goes here to basically the place where the mother-in-law of Simon Peter is. He's staying in Simon Peter's house. He touches her hand, again through touch. He doesn't speak. He touches her hand and the fever comes out of her. She's healed and she gets back to serving. Then we have the fourth healing, the healing of demon-possessed. And here you get Jesus casts out the demons with a word, and then all who are sick are brought to him and he heals all of them. So there's actually significantly more healings. But what I want to do is give you these types of healings. What you see happening is you have Jesus is working and demonstrating power amongst those who are excluded from his own community. Then he's working power over those who are part of the Gentile group in a community, right? Then he goes and locally heals a person in his own home. Does it sound anything like the 10 Commandments and how they're supposed to work about their love and rule? You see the connection, right? And then now he's demonstrating that not only does he have power over these groups, he has powers over all the supernatural parts of the world or universe, or however you want me to say that. It's a demonstration of Jesus's power by Matthew to explain what's going on. And it's an important part of Jesus being the absolute fulfillment of the promises of God. And then he brings this Isaiah. This was to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took our infirmities and bore our diseases, right? Because of why? He is the Messiah, right? He's just trying to hammer that point through till we finally get it. Let's see if they get it. On our way there, let's take a look at a couple of pictures. I want to show you a little bit in the Holy Land. The next slide here. Does that look like a UFO to anybody? Right? It feels like one too when you're at Capernaum. The architect has been critiqued a lot for it. It's not as bad as it looks when you get there. It's kind of beautiful on the inside. And on the inside, that church is built up like that because it's over the archaeology that is Simon Peter's home. And when you look at the next slide, what you'll see is on the next slide, that is Simon Peter's home, is the little back kind of wall in there. You'll notice this octagonal wall here out on the front part. What you're seeing up above us there is the church. That octagonal part is a church that was built on the 3rd century, in the 3rd century. On top of that, it would later be destroyed. And then a few centuries, about 1600 years later, they went back when they rediscovered Capernaum and they built the big church over the top, hovering over it. So you can look down. But you see that little square in the background that is actually Simon Peter's home. Just to give you a perspective of size, if you go from the stage to the wall, come to the front stage and make where the piano is, the flag, and the TV a square, it's about that size. Not very big. It would not have a sign on it that says Jesus slept here, you know, kind of thing, like you get George Washington slept here all over. But where he would have slept is probably not in the house. He would have slept up on the roof. There was more room up there where they could all spread out. And it was also cooler there in the evening. So that's where they would want to be. The next slide I want to show you is a picture of a boat, because we're going to tell that story in just a minute. And I thought, let's just do all the pictures at once. And here, this is actually a boat from the 1st century. In fact, some people, when you go there, will try to tell you this is the boat, or, well, it's a boat just like Jesus would have had. Then if a different group comes up that is part of a Jewish kibbutz, they'll tell you, well, this is the Maccabean revolt boat, also from about the same time, right? And then if somebody else comes up who is secular, they just say, this is a 1st century boat similar to the times of the turn of the millennium, right? And so like they've learned how to sell this boat to everybody. But it is a boat that is somewhat contemporaneous to the time of Jesus and is similar to about the size of what a fishing boat at that time would have looked like and would have been. I put below it, though, something I hope you appreciate, which is a little Rembrandt. The boat he paints in this picture here in slide 8 that we'll go to here, slide 8. When we get to slide 8, the picture of that boat is nothing like the boats on the Sea of Galilee. It's exactly like the boats of the Netherlands at the time when Rembrandt painted it, of course, right? But what I want to point out to you is not only did Rembrandt paint all of the disciples in the picture, and the picture's oriented a different way, it's a little bit taller and all that, but I tried to focus in for you because I wanted you to see the people. Do you notice the guy in the blue holding on to the stanchion there? Do you know who that is? That's Rembrandt. He painted himself. You'll notice Jesus is looking straight at him. Okay, and he painted himself on that same level where the Lord is looking at him and can see him in his distress, to remind us that as we do this, we were to be in the boat with Jesus. And so I just wanted to show you one of my favorite pictures there, the storm on the Sea of Galilee. All right, let's go to slide 9. We're going to take a look at a scribe, a disciple, and a wild boat ride. All right. There's a scribe who is willing to follow Jesus. He says in verse 8:19, I will follow you wherever you go. Like, do you realize how crazy that is? Do you know what a scribe is? All right, you think that maybe some accountant, maybe some engineer lacks a little in personality. They're kind of detail-oriented. They don't dance and have fun with you enough, right? That's nothing compared to a scribe. A scribe is a human Xerox machine. They were Xerox before Xerox was cool. They would write and transcribe the entire Torah from start to finish, the first 5 books of the Bible, in one manuscript that when you would unroll it, would go around this whole room. And if they made a single mistake in a yot or tittle, that's like a dot over an I or the crossing of a T, they'd have to scrap it and start over. Friends, they didn't have paper. They didn't have Office Depot or Sam's where they could, or wherever you get your paper, to go pick up new stuff. They would have to start the process with the hides and then sewing them together and then making the thing. I mean, I just can't even begin to tell you how meticulous the job is. It should actually be no surprise to us that a scribe would say to Jesus, get me out of here. I'll do anything you want to do. But also, scribes didn't go outside much. They were respected and stayed inside. And so that's kind of what's going on, because Jesus gives him an odd reply. Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. So he says, I'll follow you anywhere you'll go, you want to go. And Jesus' response is, well, it's a hard life. Are you sure? So the question I have for you is, does he? Does the scribe go? Some people are shaking their heads no. Some people say maybe. But read the next verse in 21. It says, another disciple. Well, hold on. When did it mention a disciple? The only disciple it can possibly mean is the scribe. Interesting, right? Another disciple who wants to bury his father. Lord, first let me go and bury my father. And Jesus responds, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. Friends, if Jesus comes into this room and says, follow me, don't ask to go back to the house and get a change of clothes. Don't tell him what all the different things you need and have to have. Trust in Jesus to supply everything you need and follow. There's no other acceptable reply to Jesus in Matthew. Remember, in Matthew, faith is obedience. It is following God when God tells you what to do. And so this man, by saying that, it seems reasonable today. But it's not reasonable when God tells you what to do. When God tells you what to do, nothing else should matter more than that. Okay? Let's go to the next slide. The wild boat ride. It's fun. Now, the word here is quite odd. It doesn't just say that the waves got crazy or that there was a big storm. Most of yours will talk about a storm. It literally says the water was an earthquake. And there's this word seismos that you've heard of. If you do seismo and then you put a dash and something after it, it's using a prefix to then make everything. So a seismograph, right, is that next thing. It's a Greek word that becomes an English prefix, and it sets off the spelling alert when I put it in the Greek form in there. And I got asked about it because Judy's good enough to proofread all these for me. But as it's there, no, that's that Greek word. So he's literally saying that something troubled the water so much that it shook as if it was an earthquake. And it's quite a beautiful sight to see. The boat is being swamped and Jesus is asleep. Now, how does this happen? I've said before, but I think it bears repeating with this story, that the Sea of Galilee or Lake Gennesaret, it's the same name for two names for the same body of water. They kind of are like a bathtub. So if you've ever had children or grandchildren that you're in the bathtub and they get kind of going and all of a sudden the water sloshes out and it doesn't take a lot of movement for suddenly the water to go, that's because that's the way that lake is. It has steep, rocky shores. And what happens is these storms will kind of build up as they come off either the Golan Heights or one side or that kind of area around Nazareth where the mountains are coming from the Mediterranean. And they'll kind of come over and you don't see them until the absolute last minute because the Sea of Galilee is so low and you have about these 600-foot kind of cliffs on the side. And then all of a sudden, boom, they pop right over you. And if it's a bad storm, all of a sudden the bathtub gets sloshed around. When you talk to people who are actually out there regularly, unto this day, they still fish it, right? They fish there. This happens often where these storms just kind of pop up. So they're out there, they don't see the storm comes, but the seismos word means there's something kind of more to the storm than just weather. Okay, so there's a little bit going on. The disciples, seeing Jesus sleeping, wake him. And they call on him, "Lord, save us. We are perishing." Are you kidding me? Really? I mean, friends, if you are in close proximity to Jesus, the one who Matthew has told us is the Messiah, and you know it's him, are you worried? Like, did you just not see him heal all those? Do you need to go back to the healing slides? I mean, didn't you just see what he did in front of him? He just gave the sermon on the mount. I mean, am I the only one who's like losing my mind? And there they are in the boat with Jesus, and they're terrified. Huh. We don't do that, do we? Never. We would never be terrified while we're in the boat with Jesus. We would never have any existential fears. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard. Jesus, it's interesting. You notice how he was so excited to go to the leper. He was willing to go all the way through the camp to get to the Gentile servant, right? He goes and touches without even her asking Simon Peter's mom. Like, do you see all those healings? And then he let people bring everybody to him so that he was up late into the night healing. Now he's on a boat trying to get away. He finally gets a little bit of rest. He can lay his head down and get some sleep. And when the disciples, who should know better, come to him, Jesus has a slightly different response to them. Why are you afraid, you of little faith? Jesus rebukes the waves, and it shows the power that's reserved only for God in Psalm 107:29. The waves and the winds instantly cease. And now the disciples are amazed. What kind of man is this that even the winds and seas obey him? I mean, you see the pattern, right? I just walked you through to the Jew that had been excluded, the Gentile, now the Jew and the family, right? Then all the people of the region that came to him, all supernatural challenges. Jesus demonstrates his authority, and now we're being shown that he has power even over the forces of nature. Any doubts he's the Messiah? Okay, well, let's get to the two demoniacs. Slide 11. This one's a little trickier. I must confess, have I told you, like, this is my favorite book of the Bible and we're in the favorite parts? Have I said that yet? No, yeah. I gotta confess that on this story, I like Mark's account better. Is that, y'all forgive me that one time? Well, let me tell you why. Matthew has an odd habit of having two of everything that Mark and Luke have one of. You'll see it with two blind people that are healed in a way that's similar to a story in Mark and Luke that is one. You'll see it here with the two demoniacs being healed instead of on the Gerasene shore where there was the one. It's the story where they're, the legion and the other one is thrown into the swine and they run off the cliff, right? You get a similar story here, but there are two. You also get the two donkeys in the entry to Jerusalem. So what's kind of up with that? What's going on? Well, there are some people who will argue that, well, Matthew comes first and there's a kind of Matthean primacy to their understanding of how the scriptures are, and that the others are just giving you a subset. And so when they say there's one there, they're just saying that, well, there may have been more, but they're just talking about the one to make the story a little bit more pointed. I think that's a pretty flimsy argument myself. Also, too, most people today think that Mark was first, so it's a little bit of a challenge. There's about 4 different theories, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to run all of them for you. And I know some of you are like, "Thank God, Brad." Okay, good. But let me tell you one that I don't hate. I wouldn't say I like it for explaining it, but I don't hate it. And that is that Matthew tends to really focus on kind of an authentic witness. And at points in Matthew later, he's going to talk about how when there are two, something is known to be true or to be something that must be listened to. And so, for instance, he's the one who's going to say, if somebody sins against you, you go to them directly. If they don't say things that they're going to change their behavior and quit causing you to sin, then you need to go get another, because if 2 of you come, the other has to listen, right? Do you see? And then you go get the elders, and then you do other stuff. But I just am making that point to say there's something about this that, again, is unsettled. Anybody who's talking about it just has a theory. I wish the Bible just said it, right? They're perfectly good Greek words to explain this. Matthew doesn't give them to us. But I want you to know that it's kind of odd, because in this story, there's 2 demoniacs coming out of the tomb. There are no mention of the shackles that the other story has. The other part, too, is they know who it is, because it's about, and see, this is why I think it's important to have 2, is they're giving witness to who Jesus is from the spiritual realm. Okay? And they say, "What have you to do with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" All right. This is also an important thing about faith. Sometimes we talk about faith as if it's belief, but for Matthew, that's just silly because all the demons and all the bad people, they know who Jesus is. If it was just about knowledge or belief was just knowing something, I mean, of course it's not. Belief is actually doing the right thing because of what you know. Again, I'll say it again. Faith for Matthew is obedience. Very important part. But here, the demons asked to be cast into the swine. I mean, who are the demons to ask for anything? Are you kidding me? And friends, I'm going to have to sit down for this because I'm not sure my heart can take it. Jesus does it. Jesus shows compassion to demons. Are y'all sure you want to sign up for following this God? I mean, are you kidding me? Doesn't he know what they did? And yet we're told Jesus shows compassion even on the demons. And that's something that is consistent upon all three accounts. Jesus has compassion even on demons who don't deserve it. Jesus says, "Go," they go. You can imagine these two swine herders now freed. They go back to their village, they tell everyone. And then what do those villagers do? They come back and say, "Y'all need to get out of here." Why? All their pigs are dead. And no matter what YouTube says, wet bacon tastes awful. It's crazy. So Jesus then crosses back over to his hometown. Okay, let's look at number 12. I hope a story you know. The man on the mat carried before Jesus. This story is a little kind of tapered down. It's not quite as involved as some of the other gospels, but it still has some of the main features. The important thing to see is that there were people carrying a paralyzed man, and Jesus sees their faith. Like Jesus sees their faith. Have you ever wondered why we baptize babies who can't answer for themselves? It's because the faith of the community is treated like the people carrying the man on the mat. Jesus sees our faith and counts our faith as righteousness for the child until the child is old enough to claim that for themselves. Right? It's beautiful. And so Jesus forgives the paralyzed man's sins. Had the paralyzed man repented? Had the paralyzed man said anything about, "I'm an awful, unworthy sinner"? Nothing. Jesus sees the faith of his friends and heals him by forgiving him of his sins. It's amazing. Now, some of the scribes think to themselves, and of course, none of us would ever do this, well, he's blaspheming. He's saying horrible, horrible things, because here's the problem, right? If Greg from back there runs up here right now and punches me, and Haley down here in the front says, "Greg, you're forgiven." How is that for me? Right? All sin is against God and God alone. If Jesus is forgiving sin, how can that be? Of course, that some of the scribes are thinking to themselves, "I've read the Bible, I've Xeroxed that bad boy over and over and over again. That ain't right." Okay, can you hear him? I mean, it's there. Okay, so Jesus asks them, because they don't say it out loud, "Why do you think evil in your hearts?" Why? Can he see their thoughts? He's God in flesh, fully human and fully divine. Jesus asks, which is easier to say, "Your sins are forgiven," or "Stand up and walk"? But just to be clear, stand up and walk. And the man gets up, stands up, and walks, rolls up his mat, on his way. We get another scene, and it's the crowd now filled with awe. And they glorified God. Finally, somebody glorifies God after the awe of what has happened. Who should have been glorifying God? The disciples. Who should have been glorifying God? The Pharisees. Who should have been glorifying God? The scribes. Who should have been glorifying God? Everyone. Because of what was going on. But that's not what happens. It's never what happens. Slide 13. Instead, Jesus is criticized from all sides. Who he is and what he's doing is a threat to everything that's come before. And so Jesus sees a man, and you get this little thing right before that. Jesus sees a man sitting at a tax booth and says, "Follow me," and he does. You know what his name is? Matthew. Oh, hold on. Y'all thought I showed you Rembrandt in the painting by accident. Who has painted himself into the story? Matthew. You see? It's subtle, but it's there. It's beautiful. It's the same thing to show you his relationship and participation in the life of Jesus. And so here we see the Pharisees see Jesus dining with sinners and tax collectors. Of course, Matthew's following him, so he goes over to Matthew's house, and now he's there with them, meeting Matthew's friends. And oh no, that's not okay for the Pharisees. Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? Again, Jesus replies, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice." Friends, the Pharisees should know Isaiah. They've got it memorized. Like they know it. They follow it. They try to live it. They say it's the most important part of the Bible. So why aren't they doing it, right? He says, "For I've come not to call the righteous, but sinners." Okay, beautiful. And then, do you remember John, the one who said, "There's one yet to come whose thong of their sandals I'm not even worthy to untie"? Do you remember that? We saw that earlier. His disciples come complaining. Man, I mean, they can't win, right? And here he says, "Why do we and the Pharisees fast, but yours do not?" The wedding, and they're like, "Guys, the Sermon on the Mount, we told everybody to fast, right? We told them how to do it, right?" The wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? There will be days when they fast. And then he gives these beautiful passages. "No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak, for the patch pulls away from the cloak, and a worse tear is made. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins," right? Made clear for us. Let's go to 14. Then we get a series of stories that just get put everywhere. Jesus keeps telling people, "Don't tell everyone. Don't let everyone know. Please kind of keep it secret." And yet they happen. There's a synagogue leader that knows that his daughter has died, tells Jesus, "But come and lay your hands on her and she will live." While he's on his way, it's kind of interesting. Jesus doesn't speak, but follows him, right? And on his way, suddenly a woman suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years touches the fringe of his cloak. The hemorrhaging cease, she's healed. We hear her internal dialogue. Jesus says that her faith has made her whole. They arrive at the house. Jesus says that the daughter is just sleeping, and they laugh at him. I mean, have you ever been one of those people who said, "If I could have just lived in the time of Jesus, if I could have just met him and seen him, I would have a deeper faith. I would know." Well, the truth is, even in his day, he's laughed at when he says that she's just sleeping. Then Jesus goes in and takes the girl by the hand. The girl gets up. Again, reports spread through all the land. Slide 15, I think I mentioned that there were two blind men. They followed Jesus. Have mercy on us, son of David. They asked them, do you believe that I am able to do this? Jesus now touches. According to your faith, let it be done to you. Jesus sternly ordered them again to keep silent. They didn't. They tell everybody. A demoniac who was mute was brought to him. Jesus cast out the demon. The one who had been mute spoke, and the crowds were amazed and said, never has anything like this been seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, by the ruler of demons, he casts out demons. I mean, think about that. He's healing and he's making better, and by goodness, they're not going to have it. Not on their watch. But why? Because they should be healing. They should be doing. There's a huge amount of jealousy in this of what God has given through Jesus in flesh. The executive summary again now happens. Oh, you thought that slide was just, I hadn't really gone back to it, had I? Yeah. So I want you to get the executive summary gets restated. And the only part of it that's different now is instead of to Galilee, he's now going to go to all their towns and all their villages. But he's going to need help. So he's going to, in the beginning of chapter 10, he's going to take 12 of the disciples who you get named at that point and make them apostles. Those are people sent with authority. And next week, we'll go through what those responsibilities are they're given and the authority that's entrusted. It won't be next week. It'll be the next lesson that I've got written out so far. And as he does that, he's going to send them. But this is where you get the line, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, ask the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into the harvest. But I want you to see that the book of Matthew can be kind of divided up like this. There's some pre-material about Jesus being the Messiah. There's the kind of what I call the executive summary, and not, I mean, I literally read a commentary that called it transitional matters. You know, like, I mean, it's like, are you kidding me? No, it's like the most important part. It tells you what's coming next. And it's the mission and ministry of what Jesus is doing and did in Galilee. And then you get the mission to all of the Jewish people and the people living in those areas. So both the righteous Jews and the God-fearers and those who are Gentile in their midst, right, as the Torah outlines. And then in the Great Commission, he's going to then send us to all the world, but telling us that he is going with us. But now he must become more cosmic in nature and spiritual in being to be able to affect the whole world. This is Matthew's whole trajectory. Okay, so what some people say is the least important thing, I'm telling you, is the most important part of the whole book of Matthew. All right. I was only 2 minutes over. I did that much quicker than I did earlier. I went a full 5 minutes over, so I think we ran the course. I'm going to take that's because I've got one more part. Let's do that last slide. So faith building from the text. Let me just ask you these questions, and then I'll let you ask me questions. I think the first question I would ask you to take some time, especially as we enter Lent, and reflect on is, does your faith define you more than anything else? I think it's a simple question, but it's a challenging one to answer. The second question would be, did you notice how Jesus had compassion for each one? Right? He gets a little more frustrated with his disciples who don't realize who he is and who bother him when they should know better. But for all those others, those that we tend to think were the worst kind, he had compassion and went out of his way for them. And then finally, are you still trying to put new wine into old wineskins? And if somebody will ask me a question about that to begin the questions, I will tell you a story, but I don't want to do it on time. Yeah, okay. Yes, thank you. Of the wineskins, that's perfect. So when I had a delusion at one time that me and my friend John Bellevaux were going to have a Blackacre Vineyards, and we decided to make some wine. And so what we did is we went out to Texas Hills Vineyards, where there was a really nice guy, Ken Gilstrap, who gave us some must. That is all of the juice and the grapes and all the kind of some vines in it and everything like that. And we got about 5 gallons of it. And we brought it back to my apartment there in Austin, because we had a 2-bedroom apartment and a nice place in the hall I could put it under there. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to let this stuff kind of outgas. And so I put the lid kind of loosely on it. And there it was. It's supposed to, they said, yeah, it's going to grow in volume and all that. So, I had it kind of about, 3/4 full, no big deal. And we went to bed. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to a very pungent odor. And it made me curious enough that I went into our little living room there in that apartment. And thank goodness, it was kind of like one of those 1950s movies, like called The Blob. And there was this giant kind of blob of must slowly approaching the carpet, but it was still on the linoleum, right? So I ran in and started getting it cleaned up. I prayed a little bit that Laura would not wake up, but she did. And I got it all moved over into the, I guess, kind of bathroom in the tub. And then I got a second 5-gallon thing. Thank goodness I had enough, and I poured it over there. But the reaction of changing that sugar into alcohol is so kind of over the top that basically I ended up with almost 8 gallons from a little 4 or 5 gallon amount. It really expanded. And so now you need to know that first century yeast wasn't as good or as efficient as this modern commercial grade yeast that has been shaped for thousands of years to get it to this kind of effectiveness, but it still was pungent and had a kick. And so again, wine has a significantly less alcohol level in the first century, but it still had to change to alcohol would expand. So if you put new wine, which is literally wine that is in the fermentation process, into a wineskin that had dried out and could hold a volume of wine that's fermented, when you put the new wine in it, it's going to blow up. It's going to rip apart. Okay. And so that's what the metaphor is. So thanks for asking. Yes. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, so let me say it again for the people online to be able to catch her. Was Jesus healing the centurion's servant a good PR move for Jesus? Yeah, I mean, so for Matthew and for the early Jewish context in which Christianity was birthed, I would say no. If anything, it drew criticism. And I would say severe criticism. I would say in the long run, knowing that you're going to go to all the earth, I think it is very important and significant that non-Jews are being healed. And also to people who very obviously, I mean, he said, I'm not worthy, right? Nothing about him other than a faithful desire to approach Jesus makes him even halfway worthy. But, I want to be careful. There doesn't seem to be triggers. Everything is very different. The only thing is that some people's faith and persistence causes Jesus to have awe. The fact that a centurion, this is the hard part. I mean, really, and maybe I didn't focus on this enough. When a centurion goes and humbles himself before Jesus, that alone is profoundly fascinating. Because again, if he's a person who can send servants and send slaves, why doesn't he do what Cornelius does later in Acts when he wants to see Peter? Right? He sends his people to go get Peter and bring him. And only because of a dream does Peter trust them and go. Because the Spirit revealed that to Peter. Right? It's kind of fascinating. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 Great question. So let me see if I can do my best to restate it for those watching online who are with us on Zoom. So the question, really good question. He's saying Matthew was literate. Matthew was a tax collector. Matthew knew different languages. What's going on? Why is there this delay in Matthew writing it down? And what might be going on in that interim time between the death of Jesus and the time that Matthew writes it down? Is that a fair kind of answer to the question? I think it's a great question. There's a guy named, his last name is Brown, and he writes a book called how does this say? The Gospel the Apostles Left Behind. And he's talking about the what's been passed down to us. And his theory is kind of like this about the first apostles. He kind of says that, really they thought Jesus was returning like now. Like there was an immediacy to the return of Christ and their expectation. So there becomes no need to write anything down because the expectation, and you'll hear it said in a few places, it's certainly in Paul, where it's like many will not even pass away from the who hear this before that comes. Okay, then there's but I don't think that's to me sufficient. I think that's possible. So what happens is then, according to Brown, is that late in life, people started realizing, oh my, I am going to die. I better write this down. I would say what's really different about Matthew than Mark is Mark sounds like more of what we expect from the way the gospel was apparently transmitted in those first 30 years. And it was transmitted by people walking along the trails of the roads of the Roman Empire, typically in a caravan, very similar to what Luke describes in the walk to Emmaus, where literally you're walking with somebody and they say, have you heard about the things that happened, right? And, oh, what things happened? And so you start telling them the story of Jesus and how he's fulfilled all scriptures. And this is going on, we know it's going on across the world, right? So the first gospel, I believe, and here I'm out on my own, some new scholars are looking at this, but it's not finished yet, and it's not enough. But I believe that the quella that the Germans were looking for is actually the oral tradition, and I think the Gospels were an oral tradition that then gets passed, and then what happens is either the writers of Matthew and Luke have in front of them kind of memorized oral tradition that they're building off of, or they actually have the Gospel of Mark that we're pretty certain is built right off the oral tradition. And where I go further in my love for Mark, which I do like Mark a lot, in my love for Mark, I believe that Mark is actually out of that oral tradition, but it shows you that the oral tradition still had a deep abiding theology, in the theology of the compassion of Jesus. The challenges with Matthew and Luke are when they get written down, they have large portions that were written down to be read, not just to be repeated and spoken. So that's what I think is going on. I think that there's never a time from the death of Jesus where people aren't so in awe of what they just experienced that they're sharing it out as often as anyone will listen. But the problem that I've got to lay out there for you is, remember, the Bible comes out of the tradition of the church, not the other way around. The church pre-exists before the Gospels. Right? I know that's going to be hard for some people if you're raised in a literalist kind of Bible beaten place. But the truth is, in history, it's very clear that actually the church and the traditions of the church pre-exist the Bible. The Bible's created to sustain and keep the traditions of the church. Yeah. Yeah.
He said that he was aware, we don't have it anymore, of some quotations by that were written down earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Some of Christ's words were written down in that ministry style.
Right.
And it took several decades for the church actually gather things together enough where it became sort of a powerful ministry. And so I think it's all what you said.
Yep. Yeah. So, so just for the people online, he's saying, in addition to what I just said, he would add Eusebius's description, an early church, early doctor of the church, who did a lot of writing during the time of the early church, who really understood that there were sayings of Jesus and places where things were written down that were being collected to do that, and they were written down at a pretty early stage. And yeah, I mean, I think that dovetails really nicely with the oral tradition that was going along the road. I also think that, I mean, how to say, preachers may feel, people may theologically live in a place where they want to do something, but there's always somebody pragmatic, right? And they're like, I mean, I could just hear Laura saying, Brad, don't you think you ought to write that down? Don't you I think you ought to put that on paper, get it captured. I think that, yes, I think that especially about Jesus, I think that people were so, I mean, the shock, the awe, the wonder. Moltmann's going to talk about, the Christ event that just defies all kind of logic and understanding. It was so intense and amazing that they didn't really, a lot of the Bible that we lose when we read it in these kind of weird ways on a Sunday morning and all that, you lose the wonder and awe of it. It's written by people who are just like, did you see that? Can you believe it? I mean, they would make the pandemonium after the Astros winning the World Series look like nothing. Like, I mean, it's like, oh my goodness, can you believe it? And so that's why there's a lot of this kind of brought too. The other thing I would say about Matthew, and part of why we don't think it's don't think it's the earliest, is it is actually organized in a way that makes sense. So Luke is going to organize in a way that we probably resonate with better, right? He's going to do it kind of in a history. Matthew does it in this weird geographical way I just gave you, where he lumps all this stuff together and gives you types of healings. But please don't think that's all that Jesus did. He's showing you parts of it to demonstrate Jesus's power and to make it clear. Oh yeah, did I say he's the Messiah? I mean, like, that's what's going on there. So, sorry, I think I've answered that enough. I'll go to another question. Yes. Yeah, so I think it's fascinating. I would question, does foreknowledge sorry, let me restate the question. I'll get somebody will email me tomorrow and say you didn't restate the question. So let me restate the question. So the question was, if Jesus is fully divine and foreknows things, then in a couple of instances, whether it be the disciples on the boat where he gets kind of agitated at him, or with the centurion where he's amazed, why would that unfold like that? It seems kind of an odd reaction for someone who knows what's going to happen. I would push back on that a little bit to say, I don't think foreknowledge of an event takes away its splendor. I mean, I knew my son was going to be delivered on a certain time at a certain day. It didn't make it any less special or awe-inspiring. I mean, So I would just wonder if that's true, that foreknowledge somehow takes away the surprise, or sometimes, I hate to say it, I know how people are going to act before I say something. It doesn't agitate me any less when they come back at me, when I'm trying to say what's right and good and love them, and they don't hear that. Right. So I would just say that, yeah, and even worse is when I'm the one doing it, right? I don't want to be like not a fellow practitioner. I'm trying to be goodish, right? But yeah, but I would just say, for me, I think that it doesn't negate the two. But I would also say Jesus is very in the moment in the Gospel of Matthew. We should pay attention to that. I don't know that foreknowledge is assumed to be one of the powers of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. He certainly seems to know everything going on in the moment. So he knows what people are thinking in the moment. But there doesn't appear to be a foreknowledge of that, which might suggest that people have free will and that God is going to watch it unfold. But I don't know. I don't want to hard move in that direction, but I'm a soft, just kind of put your big toe in the water. See how it feels. Yeah. I'll come to you next. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right. Sure. Mhm. Right. Yeah. So let me try to repeat that to the best of my ability, and you just jump in and correct me when I get it wrong. But I'm going to try to repeat what you said for those that are watching on Zoom. That it may be more about Matthew trying to get a point across to those he's writing to about Jesus than actually some sort of intentional thing, either about free will or foreknowledge in Jesus. That each writer has some limitations to them. And what we know is, I mean, most obviously in the book of Revelation, you know, cut him some slack. He's doing the best he can to describe undescribable things. You know, I mean, it's beyond imagination. And yet he's trying to bring something back to us that's representative. And likewise here, we shouldn't fault the gospel writers who are trying to share with us what they know about Jesus in a way that's faith building, right? Because they're trying to build our faith. They're not trying to answer some of the questions we want to poke at them. I mean, I think that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough. Yeah.
Okay. Don't tell anyone about these, you know, because sort of, doesn't say anything more about the people he was or does he know that he doesn't tell them, don't say anything, and force them to turn right around and he can't start telling everybody.
Yeah. So yeah, why is Jesus telling everybody to keep their mouths shut? Is it because he really doesn't want them to share it? He hopes they'll somehow forget the most amazing thing that ever happened in their life and not tell everybody, because, you know, people can keep secrets. Or is it because he knows that they'll go and spread the word? I think it's kind of Matthew's in a little like kind of a tweener part. There's some other in other gospels. There's this movement between him identifying himself as the Son of Man and then identifying himself as the Son of God. And there's kind of a progressionary and a key thing that it's not time yet. In Matthew, the ones worried about time are like the demons. And so like it's different than the others. So I don't see the same focus in Matthew's gospel of a time problem. I do think somebody said marketing earlier. Kitty has already gone, but she said about was Jesus doing good marketing? I think what you're saying is something similar. Like the number one way that you get a kid to do something is you tell them don't do it, right? That's their. I don't see that. I mean, there's this one part. One of the texts says sternly ordered. Like it wasn't like he kind of said don't do it. I mean, it was a real kind of thing. I can't tell because it's different, and I tried to put these in categories. I tried to break them back out. I wanted to give you all a full-on typology, but they don't fit nicely like that. I made a pretty good thing to go with the 10 Commandments to tie it to the Sermon on the Mount and bring it together. I thought there's no extra charge on that. That's all original scholarship, right? There's no commentary that says that. I just kind of put that together. But the part I can't get at, the part I can't kind of find, and maybe if y'all come across it, you can help me with it, but it's this thing that happens where the first healing, Jesus tells the person in his tradition what to go and do for the leper. But that same thing isn't said to other people who should also go and do the same thing. And so I can't figure that difference out. So I know what'll happen is I'll get a good night's sleep. I'll wake up sometime a week from now and I'll go, oh, I just found it, like that. I'll try to share it if I do, but I haven't found it. And if y'all find it, let me know, because it's to me, it doesn't, like of anybody that I want to be consistent, it's Jesus. Right? I want them to do it the same way every time. Yeah, great question though. Great question. Great thoughts, great insights and all that. But I don't want to hang it all on the author. I mean, I'm not against what you said, but I don't know. There's just a little bit more in the text that I don't have a problem with the author being human and that kind of limiting our thing. But I see that more about the description of who God is and around the description of who Jesus is. But simple actions, I do expect Matthew to be good enough to relay that to me reliably. And that's the part I'm struggling with on that one. Because I liked your explanation, but on this particular thing, I'm still I'm about 80% there. But that's where most people are in most of my dialogues. Other questions? Those are great. Do we have any questions on Zoom? I see quite a few people still left. No? Okay. All right, well, friends, I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to sit down here in the front, and if you have other questions, come ask me. And if not, I will get on to the house.